episode of Clouds of Meaning with your host Ronald. Today I'm sitting with a very interesting gentleman, an author, a coach, a CEO, a father, multilingual. You say you're an opinionated what? It's on your profile on Twitter. Ronald Muringai, welcome. How are you?
I'm alright, and yourself, sir?
I'm good. So you're looking so lovely, so nice.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Did you dress yourself, or is it the wife?
I would love to take the credit, but yeah.
It's nice that the wife came along.
If it was not me, I'd probably have just put on my Chelsea t-shirt. But
And although you came what? Well, you won something at least, and you came second, third?
Second,
and your coach has left now to Juventus.
Well, good. He should leave. Actually, we need a new fresh start, if I could say.
Okay, so maybe before we get into the book and stuff, so what are you currently working on? What are you pursuing? What's happening with you?
So currently, I've released this book called Fathering Sons, and it's kind of really changed the way I've been doing things. There's been a lot of attention and buzz around the book, but I think mostly because the content is very pertinent to societal problems today. And I think it speaks a lot of men. As actually, funny thing is, the sales that's come so far have been through references from other people. You know, we haven't really done a massive push from ourselves to say buy. People have been talking and say, oh, this one has a book, this one has a book, and that's kind of created its own life, as it were. So that's pretty much what's been, taking much of my time.
Okay, talking about the book, pushing the sales, fielding questions from the book. Have you gotten any I suppose interesting responses? Or maybe let's talk before we ask about, so what's the book about? So you wrote this book, Fathering Sons, but before you even talk about the book, I see there's you and your nipple here on the cover, and then the book is about sons, but who are you holding here on the cover?
That's a model.
Nice answer.
Because no, it is quite I think for the very few people who know me, that I don't have a son. So it's one of the things that came through, say, hey, who's this on the picture now? And we made sure that they hide their face, so the face not visible.
So but who's on the cover?
That's my daughter.
That's wonderful. I found it very curious. I thought I'm going to ask you about this.
Actually, you're only probably the fourth or the fifth person to ask, because nobody ever really takes notice.
But beautiful cover. I think beautiful cover, very relevant topic. So essentially, so this is your second book. The first one is
Excellence or Nothing.
Excellence or Nothing. And so now this is Fathering Sons, and I think it's very. Yesterday being Father's Day, I think it's quite lovely to actually go through this and talk about some of the ideas in the book. And so what inspired the book? For those who haven't read it, what made you think about writing this book?
I would be lying if I take credit for this book. Actually, like I was saying at my launch, this book, literally, I was forced to write. I was actually writing a follow-up to my first book, Excellence or Nothing, and I think it was on the 5th or 6th chapter thereabouts that I just really felt in a heaviness in my heart, to speak to this particular topic, and I think I can only ascribe that to God and the Holy Spirit, who really just pushed me towards this corner, because this is not something that I really wanted to write about and talk about, especially pertaining to where the real heart of the thing comes from, which is my relationship with my own father, and how, of course, that has shaped much of who I am currently, and I think that self-introspection and looking forward at what other people have been saying about this and speaking to different conversations about guys that I've had with, you realize, this is just a topic bigger than just myself, and I think it's something that we need to, as a society, dwell upon, try and find what is it that we can really do to improve this thing called fatherhood.
Okay, so as I was going through the book, in the beginning you tell the story about your wife coming, telling you that she's pregnant, and then you just think about, you say, hang on, okay, something's going to happen and you need to prepare yourself.
Sure.
So you felt pressed to you say you call it a heaviness, to write the book, but through your own journey becoming a dad. But how is it fathering your daughter? Is you said a year and
6 months now.
So how has it been? How has it been being?
Well, it's been a great journey. I think from the time that she came through to announce, excitedly so that she was pregnant. Well, I didn't really believe it instantaneously because she was looking forward for pregnant.
Yeah.
So when she did, I just thought, oh yeah, eyes roll. Yeah, it's probably not true, but who knows? Let's see how it goes.
Yes.
And indeed, a few months later, the signs and the wonders were there. So after that, I think it's been an amazing ride, man. I think being a parent, nobody can really explain it to you and write it down for you. You just really have to experience it for yourself. And this little human that just gets formed from but by the time you're reading all those pregnancy updates and checking out, okay, now she's the size of a carrot, now she's the size of a banana, etc., etc. Lo and behold, now she's running around the house. Being privileged to have a front row seat of her growth and her development is it's phenomenal, man. You really can't put words to describe that.
And what would you say is so? What do you love about being a dad? Like now, what are some of the things that you enjoy about being a dad now, as you father?
I think for me it's time with my daughter.
Yeah,
she's such a gem. She's an angel, and she loves daddy more than mommy.
Yeah,
I think she started saying daddy when she was 2 months old. Thereabouts, daddy.
Yeah.
And today that's the name she calls out the most. So I love my daughter. She's just a sweet little thing, and I think the thing that I enjoy the most, like I said, is really just spending time with her, playing with her, and her, just reciprocating that affection. It's priceless.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So this is the experience that I had. I remember when my wife told me that when she got when she's pregnant, she got a pregnancy test, she's pregnant, right? I remember we went to the gynae. This is the first thought that came to my head after we did the test. So they found that it's a girl, right? One of the first things I thought is okay, I want to run out of this room and just fix every guy. Fix every guy because my daughter is coming,
Sure.
And I don't know what it's like for you. Do you ever think about the world in which your girl will grow up in and how you feel about that? Yeah,
I do think a lot, and I think if you do take heed of what society is talking about, and there's recently there was this whole men are trash thing trending. Every now and again, when something happens in the media, something comes up and that hashtag comes up again, and it kind of puts men in a position of, projects them to be somewhat less than human in a way, and they do so many wrong things, etc., etc. So of course I'm worried and concerned of where my daughter will end up and what kind of a guy she'll end up with, etc., etc. But I think I'm quite relaxed about trying to over process that, because I know I'm not in control, I'm not in charge of any of those processes. So I just really just let go and let God, as it were.
Okay, so a bit of you think about it, but you're not too concerned about what will happen.
I'm not in charge, so.
Okay, so maybe let's get into the book. So then you write this book. So the way you went about doing it, you said you sent out 120 questionnaires. You sent one to me as well.
You never replied.
Which I never replied. I do apologize. But I'm just struggling with time, actually. In fact,
think that time actually when I sent them out, you were still busy with your PhD, was it at the time?
Yeah, I did. Which also it's another story. We must talk about it another day. But I generally struggle with time. I think I just have too much on my plate, and so then you 44% rate. So then people responded to you, and you had some interesting responses to the book.
Yeah. And
one being somebody saying to you that actually this is actually very hard.
Yeah.
Do you have any other interesting things just about the questionnaire when you sent it out, like observations about this particular question you're asking about fathers?
I think the most interesting observation actually is the question I asked on what would you like to hear your father say to you?
Yeah.
And almost universally, I can't remember the percentage really, but it was almost 60 or 70% of the guys would just say, I wish my father would say to me, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And if you look at the other questions, there's 23 questions altogether in that questionnaire.
Yeah.
There hasn't been one almost universal answer as it was with that particular question.
I see.
Which kind of just said to me, a lot of guys, I don't know the psychology of it, perhaps you'll know it better.
Yeah.
Really just want that affirmation and that acceptance by their dads, know, to say they have done well, they're doing all right, or they're on the right path, as it were. And I think as the responses were coming through, it was almost just obvious. I wish either he told me that I'm proud of you, or I love you. One of those two.
That's very interesting, because actually what you say, so psychologically what we're doing as men is we are pursuing competence. So one of the things that we want is, most men are concerned about just being competent.
Sure.
And that's why whatever we do, we want ratings. We want people to score. How am I doing at work? Even in the bedroom, we want the scores. Like, give me the score. How am I doing well? So we want to be competent, which also flows in to areas like, if you don't work, you're not competent. And I can guess that who from, if not your father, if your father says to you, well done, I'm proud of you, because you want that affirmation, because we say manhood is bestowed. It's other men that give you that, you're a man now. So that makes sense to me why that could stand out, because we care about that. We care that we are good enough.
That's true. So, and I think with that as well, it was a tough thing, man, to get men to really just honestly answer this question. I had to prod a lot of the guys a lot, because there was a reluctance, to deal with those issues. I'm sure you've seen a lot of guys grow up without their fathers. A lot of guys struggled with the notion of actually having a sort of relationship with their father. So trying to deal with these issues now in a form of a questionnaire and ask themselves and do that self-introspection was a bit tough on a lot of the guys. So I think even for that, what I call a good response rate, probably half of that is something that I had to force and squeeze out of these guys, because they really just didn't want to deal and face up with those issues. So yeah, man, it was quite a journey, I should say.
Do you think it's the question, and also the fact that men generally, struggle to communicate their emotions effectively, because I suppose the way we are socialized, it's something that we don't like talking a lot about how we feel. But I find in therapy, men they'll tell you something, and at the end they'll say, so what do I do? Like, men want I suppose things to do. So that question, do you think it also has to do with the fact that we're not used to just maybe expressing ourselves in that way? We express ourselves in different ways. But two, you're also pressing a very sensitive nerve, because your questionnaire then almost forces somebody to think about that very difficult experience of either not having your father, or having a father who was present but not there, or you had a very conflictual relationship with your dad. I
think it's actually both, because generally men, like you said, alluded to earlier, we don't like talking about emotions. I just laughed, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, that my wife was actually trying to figure out what is it that's happening in your head, and I'm telling her, look, if there's anything I'll let you know, but I think half the time they don't really get the fact that we're not expressive, especially linguistically, if we are, if I can use that term, but it's tough. Or maybe not tough, but perhaps not the norm that guys, are
talk about what they feel.
And I think the other thing as well is, of course, having touched on that now, and the relationship statuses that they had with their fathers and the kind of relationships that they had, that makes it even more difficult thing to talk about. So I think they really would have struggled with both of those things. Firstly, they don't talk, and secondly, the relationships weren't that great with their dad. So it's something that I think one guy said, I've dealt with my issues with my dad, and I don't like to open that can of worms again. He never actually came back to me with a response to the survey. But I think that just was to me, something that just showed how difficult it must have been to have a relationship, or the fact that he didn't have a relationship with his dad, because his dad is alive, but he just wouldn't talk about it. Just wouldn't want to even talk about those aspects of that relationship.
But I can imagine, because you are touching on stuff. I mean, you also say something here in your introduction. So I'll just read it.
Sure.
So men who are generally conditioned to not express their emotions tend to suffer in silence, while their hearts cry out desperately for their father's affirmation and or recognition that they are doing well, or a pat on the back accompanied by the simple words, "I'm proud of you, son." And why that jumps out for me, I wanted to explore this idea around men not also expressing themselves, you know. I mean, do we actually want that? Do we actually want men to be
expressive,
like emotional, you know? Because I want to unpack this a little bit more. Like, because there's this thing about men don't express themselves, and the other side of it is, but maybe men don't express themselves in a way that perhaps a woman might. In fact, the perfect man, like when people joke around, they'll say, in fact, the perfect man is actually a woman.
Exactly.
You know, and so, I mean, should we, what do you think about it? Should men like cry? And
I think beyond just that kind of expressiveness that we are kind of used to, for me, particularly with this book and the content thereof, it's the manner, the content that should be talked about, the stuff that should be discussed about. And this is particularly now things that hurt us emotionally, that hurt us, you know, and we somewhat struggle to articulate and talk about all these things when inside we're actually suffering as a result of that. So it's not like we should become as expressive as possibly our women are, but let's at least talk about the issues that we're facing and suffering, because I'm sure you know as well from the suicide rates that almost the majority of people who commit suicide are men, and you look back into the reasons why, it's also, well, they're suffering from stuff, but they really can't talk about it because they think, you know, we are the Superman, we need to be fixing the world and not crying about the state of the world. So express yourself, yes, in terms of the issues that you need to speak about, the issues that are affecting you, that are afflicting you, and that you find yourself in a corner about, but not necessarily now we have to be the criers. And
because sometimes that's what it sounds like. It sounds like, you know, we need to be crying and stuff. And I just wonder from a personality perspective, because you know, when they do personality assessments or research, they find that most men are actually systematic in their thinking, and women are more empathic. So and then you get some women who are more systematic and some men, but men as a group, we are more systematic. So we care more about things as opposed to relationships, and I think a human being needs that. I think if you're living, there's time to cuddle, and then there's time where things need to be done.
Exactly.
And so it's something that I think about. The other thing I wanted to follow up on is this idea that so before I get there, so even with suicide, right? I don't know what you think about this, but this is what they are finding now. Most people who commit suicide are women, or who attempt suicide. But the ones who complete it, so the ones who are successful at it, are men.
Other guys,
and that also boils down to the methods that men use, because women would generally use things like taking pills and stuff, where men would go for like hanging, gunshots, like for lack of a better word, more effective ways of committing suicide. So what the question I want to ask is, if then women are also trying to commit suicide a lot, because I suppose emotionally maybe they take on a lot, but we are more successful at them completing suicide. Do you think that the world is shifting in that women are like men, or men are men? Are we different? I'm just trying to tease out this thing that men. I'm just trying to say women are also suffering in a sense. So the fact that maybe we are more successful at it, but does it also do we also neglect the fact that maybe women are also maybe facing the things that men face? It's just that maybe they deal with it different. I don't know what you think about that.
Look, I think from the perspective of the book and my conversations with the guys, I can definitely say that with the men, it's a problem of being able to articulate their problems, particularly to other men. I think the fact that they could not relate well with their dads, I'm just speaking in general now, means speaking in general to another man is already a problem now, because now they don't know how to handle the thing they've always known, how to communicate with the women folk, etc. And when it comes to women now, as you ask, I really wouldn't know. I haven't tried to figure out, how does the woman brain work? How do they? Well, I'm still struggling with my wife. I've done a great job now.
I shall talk to you after this interview.
But I don't. The problems we face might be the same, but the manner in which perhaps we deal with them could be a lot more different, because I think they have a lot more opportunities to speak. Women, they spend 5 minutes together, they're friends. Guys can spend 5 minutes together and say hi in that 5 minutes. Literally nothing can be said. We can just look at the TV, watch the football, and you mind your business, I mind mine. Whereas women, by the time the football ends, they'll be knowing about all the issues and stuff. So I think they have a bit much more. That's me being general again. More opportunities, I think, to vent, as it were, to speak about the issues than guys have. But the one thing I was actually talking about now, the contrast to that, is that when guys finally do connect, they actually talk, I would say, deeper and more meaningful stuff than what women would have said in 3 times the amount of time. I don't have the stats to back this up. But this is just my.
No, it's actually quite a keen, very interesting observation, because I remember reading an article that said that intimacy for men is side by side. So when men are spending an intimate time, it's doing something together. It's watching soccer, it's going fishing. So it's just side to side. So we are intimate like this. And then intimacy for women is face to face, but for us face to face is more of a conflict, and so sometimes we misunderstand each other, so women want to be intimate with us, but for us is this either I avoid you or I confront you. And so there is some research about then how men also are, they can be intimate in that sense, and then but men talk more about meaningful things with their wives, and then wives would talk the more meaningful things is not with their wives, but it's with their family and friends. So that's it was an interesting thing. And this whole talking, they say men say more words and women say words, but the word difference is like about 400-500 words per day.
Really?
The difference.
I thought it was actually 10,000.
I mean, I remember reading an article, because I was also interested in because we do talk. This is the things that we talk about.
I think that's the difference is the content of the discussions versus.
Yes. Okay. And so before then I move on. What do you just on this men and women thing, do you think that there's a relevance? I mean, you wrote a whole book about it. Do you think that before we talk about fathers, so just men in general, do you think the idea of a traditional man is desirable, and is it fading? Are we seeing a new man, a more expressive man with time? What are your ideas? A more expressive man, a more more connected, intimate, or do you see men going back to their roots? I'm just because there's a joke with time how men are starting to grow their beards. The more the world is crying for men who are a bit more in touch, then men start looking more rougher and scruffier. So what's your idea of the future men?
My idea, and what I'm propagating actually, is we need to ditch some of the so-called traditional things that have caricatured us men and put us in a certain box that doesn't actually suit what our children require and need. So we knew, for example, growing up, that there's a chair that's reserved in the house that's for dad. Nobody sits on that chair. Nobody dares to do anything. There's stuff that's just for dad. When dad walks in the house, all hell must break loose. Everyone must just shiver with fear and run to their rooms. And if that is the traditional guy, if that's the description of what a man was, I would really propagate that we move away from that, because looking at what these guys were saying in the questionnaire, people want to be told that they are loved. And I think for almost 92% of the guys that responded, they never had their dads tell them that we love them. And is that a bit feminist in a way, that a man should express to his young offspring that he loves him? Is that embarrassing? Is that un-African? Is that we need to challenge all these perceptions, because at some point in time it can't be that the very sons themselves are saying, I want to hear my dad tell me that he loves me, but at the same time when they grow up to be the same men who do not or aren't able to say those words that they wished to have heard from their dads. So I would say I don't really know where the man is going towards. I can see the beards. You really see them. With the wife the other day that perhaps it's a Game of Thrones phenomenon that all these guys now have these big beards. But should we be a bit more in touch, with ourselves for the benefit of our children and our wives? I think definitely if that enhances the relationships that we have, if that makes it better for the next generation, what do we have to lose? If there is a certain traditional aspect we must drop off for the benefit of the betterment of humanity, why not?
I agree with that. I mean, I can see why that would be important. That I think why we need to embrace, express more towards our children and our wives and partners and even each other, because I think we are raised to compete with each other.
We can't just accept that this is the status quo, so therefore we must, a man must do these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and yet our sons and our daughters are crying for something else. Well, why don't we just give them what they need?
The other side, when I think about it, is but are there things that the previous generation has done wrong? Okay, so let me ask it this way. I think sometimes there's a tendency with different generations to blame the previous generation for whatever, a lack of platforms.
Starts with those lines.
So a lack of platforms, or they didn't do this, they didn't do that. But when I think about it, I don't know what your thoughts are, is I think our fathers, I just think of the world that my father grew up in, and I think it's a totally different world
the one that you grew up in,
that I grew up in. My father's father used to sit at the crawl there, and he never really interacted with his dad. And for me, I grew up watching TV where people hugged each other. They say things that are like "I love you" and things like that. And if you take it a bit further, the idea, even if I could even maybe stretch it to this way, the idea of romance, like roses and diamonds and all this, was like an invention to sell diamonds. And so there's this idea that we have of romance currently, but it was something that was developed, marketed, repeated, and it's the standard now. But I think my question is then, if we take all those things, this thing of us saying that our fathers didn't tell us that they love us, or they didn't do as well as they did, do we ever also consider the fact that maybe at that time they had different concerns, like apartheid and fighting, and that maybe we because of what they went through, then we have the luxury to entertain things like family time and what do you think about that?
It's a reality. And I think I do mention it in a lot of my chapters actually on that book, talking about that. Firstly, of course, let's talk about what the system did in terms of apartheid, segregation and stuff. With the growing economy at the time, Southern Africa, the mines popping up and the mining towns, etc. So a lot of men moving from their rural villages to go and look for work so they can actually support their families back home. And in as much as that's good for the sake of the well-being of the family, what it did was create a gap between the fathers and the sons in terms of that relationship, and daughters, not cancelling out the daughters as well.
Yes.
But that created a new problem where dads only now came back home probably for Christmas or for Easter, because that's when enough time was available for them to travel and to spend a bit of time with their children. That created a gap. Now kids grow up in essence without their fathers, even though they're alive and functionally married to their mothers.
They're busy hustling.
There we go. So can we now blame that kind of old man to say you didn't spend enough time with your child when he was really just trying to put food on the table? Definitely not. At the same time, you describe a situation perhaps with your dad and his dad, where the culture was a lot more different in the time that he grew up versus the time that you grew up versus the time that your children will be growing up in. So should we now remain static in the things that have been that defined what a man is and what a father should be like, or should we now adjust going forward accordingly and make sure that we take into account what is now there and of course furnish the needs of the next generation? So in essence, what I'm trying to say is we cannot at all times put the blame on the generation prior, because they had their own set of circumstances and challenges to face with when it came, and obviously going forward. So for example, if somebody didn't grow up with their father because perhaps his dad had some sort of marital issues with the mom, probably they never even got married, etc., 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 can he now therefore use that as an excuse or blame that for his current behavior, etc.? In as much as it does influence, it means what do you have to now do to try and break off of that so you build a better model going forward? So the baton really comes from one generation to the next, indeed, but ultimately the idea and the responsibility remains ours to make sure that the baton that we pass on to the next generation is a bit more different than the one that we got from the previous generation. We don't benefit therefore from blaming them. We don't really take all of what they did or / did not do and blame it onto the current generation. How do we looking now make sure that going forward we make it a better model? That's what I think.
I like what you're saying, because I think that's why this book and books like this are so relevant, I think, because we should have this conversation. We should have this conversation about, so how do we then take the baton and then try and see what we create. So you touched on something now about, say, the migrant work, when fathers had left, and you touched also on the idea, you also mentioned it in the book, about, say, I think you talk about lobola as well. Because there are these things that say you have a child with somebody, and because you didn't pay dowry and you didn't do the necessary things,
you don't have access to the child.
You don't have access to this child. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that?
Right. So these are cultural things that we carry down. By no means propagate that we do away with our cultural precepts. My idea and what I'm propagating for is the enhancement of that father and son relationship. And in so doing, there are things, of course, that our culture almost impedes for this to happen successfully. Now, for example, mommy and daddy probably weren't in love. Let's just look at the worst case scenario.
But they met at a party somewhere.
They went to the club, they were naughty, and then one thing led to the other.
And there you were.
Bang, we're pregnant. So this guy had no intention in the first place of marrying this girl, but things happened and now there's a baby. So what happens then? Does this lady just raise this child on her own because she had no prior relationship and she's not intending whatsoever to introduce this guy to the family, which is what has happened in many instances? Does this guy, in this particular instance, knowing that he's done messed up, as it were, for lack of a better word to describe it, follow up on this child and actually take care of it, or let sleeping dogs lie and just So what I'm saying is, look, stuff has happened. Something's broken between that relationship between the parent and the co-parents themselves. But that should not in any way impede the relationship that should be built between both sets of parents and the offspring that comes from those parents. So they have their problems and whatever it is, perhaps that has made sure that there's separation of some sort takes place, but that should not in any way come in between the building of a relationship, and a meaningful one at that, between the father and the son, or / the mother and the daughter, or whatever it is.
I hear it. I also think it's a tall ask, though.
It is.
Taking from what you're explaining, where two people who didn't
previously had a relationship, that's like the worst case scenario.
And now these people have to be mature enough and consider the child's needs first.
Yes.
And these people, but were operating maybe it's the kind of people who just want to gratify themselves
at that time.
And now we are asking them to, never mind, to almost delay, I suppose their wants, and to think further about what would be important for the child.
Exactly. And it's important as well that they do that, because now if you look at some of the response that I got from the guys, there's some probably who came from a polygamous relationship, offspring that is, and who in some way had a dislike for their fathers, because first of all, daddy didn't love my mom, he chucked us out, and all manner of issues that come from that as well, where you realize now that we've actually raised somewhat an angry generation of young men. You know, we thought Tupac had it bad, it's going into the next generation as well, because now we have almost done the same thing as the generation did prior. Probably not purposefully, but the same set of circumstances now transcending itself into the next generation. Now we need to be really conscious about it. We need to make a decision. That's why I think that the book for me is very important, because we say, okay, this is the issues, but what are we going to do about it to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes that the previous generation did going into the next generation? So obviously, whatever set of problems or things that have made sure that there's a separation of parents that takes place at this generation, how do we ensure that still the relationships between the father and the offspring, or the mother and the offspring, are not affected? They're not going to be ideal. Let's face the facts. If you're spending only a weekend with your child because of the court has granted you that, versus if you are staying at home, basically means this guy has 7 days a week time with his child, whereas this one is only 2 days a week with his child. So obviously it's not going to be the same. But the fact that he's in his life, and this child knows that my dad loves me, and even though we don't stay with him, he still takes care of my needs financially, but also emotionally. Look, can we ask for a better model?
I think we need to, I suppose, try a little bit harder, try different things to make it work. The other thing you mentioned is, I think, your parents divorced?
Yeah, they divorced
when you were in grade one. Okay, so your thoughts on divorce? And
sure, divorce.
Like
I would want to say I hate divorce. Look, looking at my own life and how my life became post that, I think it is not the ideal thing. In fact, if I was a authoritarian ruler of a country at some point, I would actually outlaw divorce. You divorce, great. Let's put you to the gallows. But what it does, I think what parents don't realize half the time, not just divorce, whether it's parental separation or things that happen in the family, is that kids are also involved in the process. Now, it might be a matter of, okay, this parent perhaps has much more money or has the opportunity to take care of the child, so perhaps let's put the child. And the courts, actually, I do that in the book as well. They deal with what they term best interests of the child. And they don't at some times realize that it's not just the financial needs of the child that needs to take center case, but also the emotional well-being of the child that needs to be taken care of. And so it's been almost automatic in the years that if a certain case like that happens, children go to their mom. And as a result, they know so much more of their maternal family, etc. They're exposed more to that than they are, obviously, depending on the relationship between the mom and the dad post the divorce. In my case, my mom was very gracious. She would. I think I got to a stage where at some point I might even hated my dad, but she would keep encouraging us, he's still your father, you're never going to get another father, go and spend time. And she would ship us off and spend time with him in the rural areas, but with his grandmother, at his house with his new wife, etc. And much as that all looked weird and we wouldn't have wanted that at the time, we look back in hindsight now and realize, hey shucks, that actually was a good thing, because now we managed to build some sort of relationship with our parents, the divorce side of it thereof anyway. And had we been allowed to dwell within our anger and fed that beast, as it were, things would not have been, as one would see them today. So,
and we're talking about divorce, but we can't talk about divorce without talking about marriage, because and one of the things that I'm noticing, the stats say half of the people who get married divorce, including people in church.
I mentioned that as well.
You do mention that. That's why I'm bringing it up here. You including people in the church, but it almost sounds now that even divorce is like a swear word. Marriage. Excuse me. Like when people say, when you talk about marriage, people take it as if you're talking about something archaic something.
Yes.
I don't know if you've had that kind of experience.
Look, that I wouldn't even say it's an experience. I would say it's more actually the prevailing thought over this thing. Marriage now, much as it is such a sacred, I would call sacred institution, is being taken so flippantly, and we marry today, things not working out, two years down the line, perhaps even a year down the line, I have someone 3 months down the line, they actually filed for divorce. So I don't think we really taking it as important as it should be, because in as much as, of course, there's all the love and the lovey-dovey that bubbles in the stomach, etc., we need to also think about the next generation, because out of a marriage comes children, and out of these children comes the next generation. Now, what are we modeling for them if we do not take marriage as seriously as it should in this generation? They are growing up looking at that and seeing people just get married and they get divorced. In fact, there's I don't know if I mentioned that in my book as well, there's a survey that was done, and this was amongst the youth about marriage, and they thought that marriage should be a contract that should be renewed every 5 years or at certain intervals. After 5 years, let's sit down again and think, is this marriage working for us? Yes, does it tick boxes? Well, perhaps we'll be better friends. Sharp, let's divorce. And to think that we have moved from a place where marriage is the reason and the result that should be before any kids come along, fathers, potential fathers, future fathers, current sons, future daughters, etc., to now an option. People just go to sperm banks now and get a baby and just move on because they can't, or maybe not can't get a man, but choose not to have a man and just do it themselves. So we've denigrated, and I think we've diluted the essence and the meaning of that institution so much that it's actually affecting the views of the current generation going forward. And I think I'm really not in a space of happiness regarding that.
It's concerning. I mean, when you're talking about sperm donors and stuff, I think there was a court case where they were busy arguing whether they were trying to argue the fact that if you donate your sperm, you can't do it anonymously anymore. That it is a human right for a person to find out who their father is. So people, you do this saying, but I can raise this child by myself. But you forget that this person is going to have questions about identity.
Exactly.
So they were trying to argue that in the future, a person can't just donate and leave.
Walk away,
because if a person wants to find out who they are, they need to somehow find out. Then on marriage, the other thing I was thinking about when I was reading here was I was wondering, I mean, in the context, the culture that we're living in, have some people found your book offensive?
Not yet. If they have, they haven't told me about it. But
because I can think of a few groups who'd read this and then want to come for you.
I think something came up around about that when we were doing the editing process, actually, interestingly, that you bring it up. And I had mentioned some form of marriage is acceptable, of course, by the South African Constitution, which I deemed inappropriate for raising children. And I think something the lady who was editing for me picked it up and said,
no, you can't say that.
And I wanted, of course, to proceed and just keep it in the book, but then I thought, okay, the bigger picture of things, we really want to try and make a difference here. So look, there are people who won't like 100% the content that I've given. I make it by I'm unashamed about the fact that I've written it from a Christian perspective, and therefore my worldview and whatever is written in there is determined from that perspective. So it's word-based, indeed, but at the same time, it's what I believe should have been the model from the beginning of time, and if we had kept that, certainly would have been doing all right to this day. But the fact that we've diluted it and brought in all these other models of so-called acceptable marriages, acceptable models of families, etc., that have actually eaten away at what should be the ideal. So I think if they want to come for me, go for it.
And the other thing was you talk about ancestors. I can read here why the search is how you mention it. So the identity connection to one's father is such that many tribes in Africa believe you will not succeed at anything in life unless and until you find out who your father is and perform the requisite rituals to gain ancestral acceptance. And we have a lot of that where a lot of people you know, hey, when life is not working out, they say you need to find out who your father is or where you come from. And have you had anybody comment on that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think that requires not much comment really, because I think if you're an African, you would know that first of all, the surname that you carry, you know, kind of tells you where you come from, and in most of our tribes, I don't know about the Bedis, but there's a clan name that comes with that. The clan name has clan praises that are attached to that. So there's a whole lot of identity culturally that comes with you just having a particular surname. And so for children who are born and currently are using their mother's surnames, there's always a yearning and a need, I'm speaking in general terms as well, to reconnect to their fathers, their original fathers, their biological fathers, identity, trait and trail, because that's where they find themselves. And when they themselves die and become the ancestors, they'll be in an acceptable place, as it were. So of course I'm speaking about stuff that I'm not well versed with as a Christian man, but I'm just speaking from the traditional African perspective. And hence it's something therefore that finds extreme importance. And I think beyond just even that, someone finding and knowing who they are, and determining what their background is, what their history is, which also becomes important in where they are going. All of that becomes important, and I think it's super important then therefore that they know whose child are you. And if you look at it in biblical terms as well, a child is determined obviously and carries their father's name, so their legacy is connected to their fathers. You don't live as an island on the earth, as it were. You know, you are connected to your father, and if you are the father, then therefore your children obviously reflect on your legacy. So you can't delineate that, and I think the identity issue is paramount, particularly when it comes to the fathering and the father relationships between their children.
And I mean, so the title of the book is Fathering Sons, perspective on being the father every son needs, right? And you get the idea that the sons are suggesting, almost requesting, if I had this, if my father had given me this. You know, in psychology we say children parent their parents as well. That as your children parent you, you also parent them back, because there are things that you teach them that they wouldn't otherwise have. Teach them about Twitter.
Interesting,
and how to and the teens now, you can't tell them. You need to how you need to negotiate with them and talk to them like that. And do you think it's a good idea for children, for sons, to give a perspective to their fathers?
I think it's extremely important. In fact, this book is, I always call it a two-way mirror. So what it's done is we've gotten all of these responses and all of these views from sons. But a majority of these sons are already now fathers and are becoming fathers. And I think, like I said earlier about the legacy issues, that fathers would love to know before they get into the grave, how did I do? If I were to attend a KPI meeting with my children, you know, they would also want to know how they fared as fathers, you know, in terms of their performance of the fathering duty of their sons. But also importantly, these sons need to almost frame in a way what it is that they expect a father to look like. So I say this book is like a two-way mirror, because now it provides the sons with what an ideal father looks like. But at the same time, it also provides the fathers with what the sons would like to hear or would like to experience from their fathers. So then it goes therefore two ways in the like that, to say, okay, fathers get what they need, sons get what they need, and both groups benefit at the end of the day from the content of the book. Because
I'm wondering, what do children know about being fathered, you know?
They probably don't know anything, but they know what they want.
But is it good for them?
Well, you tell me. You're the psychologist.
No, I was just thinking about, I thought it's a different angle, and I was also thinking, you know, with just in my mind musing about parenting, whether fathers should determine maybe we can even go into this, like for example the idea of legacy. That it would be nice to actually get your mind on this. This idea of legacy. So you have, as a father, then there are things that you imagine that your child will do, and very often then maybe the child might have different ideas from what you want to do.
Sure.
Now I'm just thinking then, as a father, should you then listen to your, let's say you have a business, or you guys you are kings, you're a chief, and or you've got a certain level of businesses that you need some sort of succession plan, and there's a way you feel and think this is the way I need to train my children so that they'll be able to take this thing up. But your sons and maybe your daughters as well have a different idea about whether they want to get involved in your kingdom or get involved in the business. Now, should you listen to your son, or should you think that I'm the leader, he's the vision, you listen to me?
Yes. I think for actually there's a bit of a answer that comes from the response that comes from that from this survey, and most of the sons, I think it pertains now to their careers, had that freedom of choice, as it were, to choose for themselves what they want. But look, we Africans, and generally we're not taught to talk back. We're not taught to argue with our parents. It's only now, I would say, in the new age Africanism, where a discussion can take place between a parent and a child, and we can actually provide reasons for why I'm giving an instruction. It's not just a one-way street that I've given you an instruction. I've said so because I'm dad and I'm mom. It's non-negotiable. So the whole point of the thing is this is based on a relationship, and the dynamics of each relationship are different as well. So a king, for example, William, is the son of Charles. He knows at some point in time he doesn't have a choice but to become king ultimately at some point in time, and he might want to be an artist, but he might have to put all of these needs and desires that he has internally, personally, aside for the sake of the kingdom, as it were. Probably that's what's going on in his mind. I have no idea. But you might also have a Richard who has two kids, a Venus and a Serena, and decides, you know what, I'm going to teach these kids to play tennis, and 20-30 years down the line, they conquer the world. They face them. The two daughters are playing in finals back to back. Much the chugging of some of our melanin. Okay, let me not go there.
But we know what you mean. We have some Africans doing big things in the world.
So my point is, therefore, should we just let children just find their way, or in some way, I'm actually now asking you a question, should we at some point in time direct their destinies and where they go to? It's a conversation.
It is a conversation, and I asked because as I was just going through this, these are some of the ideas that came to me. Well, at the moment I'm not sure, because I think sometimes it's convenient. Like for example, if your father is doing very well and he's moneyed and he hasn't seen you in a while, and you realize this is your father, I find people don't have such an issue sometimes with going back, because he's of a certain standard. But if your father is somebody who's struggling, who needs money, and you can just see the man and not want to get involved. As far as legacies, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What I know is a human being is better left to find their own, to themselves, to actualize. But then I wonder about all the things. So you write a couple of books, you build this company. Should you now your daughter care about that, or should you let her follow her dreams? Now, would you sell everything that you've built and then give for her, or if there's someone else who says mentor me, and would your daughter say, well, I'm not interested in that, but I also don't want this person to, do you know what I'm saying? It's such an interesting thing to think about. It'd be nice to actually ask an attorney about legacy and heritage and how to structure this. But maybe it's another book you need to
I'll send out a survey
and think about. Okay. So when you think about father, what do you think it's important to know? Some of the things that you think about. What are some of the things that you think that we need to think about? Some of the things that I haven't asked you, but you think some of these are the pertinent points in the book. that I suppose as a generation we need to
look,
entertain.
I think that the most important thing is going into the next generation, beyond obviously the discipline that fathers need to provide to their sons and their daughters, beyond the provision, beyond all the teachings that they have to teach. I think the one thing that came through very, very strongly from the responses is how men learn how to love and treat their wives or / their girlfriends from their fathers. I think for me that's an important aspect of the book that I would like to actually point out and say, men don't just become, men don't just love because there's a certain internal thing inside of them, especially when they treat their wives and they see what they see from dad doing to mom, they tend to replicate going into the next generation. And hence we need to be intentional about how we treat our wives. We need to be intentional about how we speak to our wives, how we treat our wives in front of the kids. So much that this is not just how I treat my wife, but also keep in mind that this is how my son will treat his wife in the next 20 to 30 years. So I think there's a big responsibility upon us as fathers to not only therefore just tick the boxes when it comes to our relationships with our wives, because there's also that aspect to say whatever they are seeing, I might be telling them love your wife, treat your wife well, etc., etc. But they're most probably looking at what I'm doing, and taking that and modeling that. There's a certain respondent to the survey who saw his mom being abused physically by his father, and at some point in time I was actually regretting because he ended up also abusing his girlfriend at the time, and that is a heartache, because I'm sure, and I suspect when he grew up probably he would be telling himself, I would never do something like this, and probably hate his father for it and take all this. But at the end it is sad to see how so many years down the line he becomes the very same one who does the very same thing that he probably. So there's a connection, and I think it's important for us men to sit back, think about it really on a deep perspective, and think about the way we treat our wives and our lovers, because there's that generation of our sons are watching, our kids are looking, and they would want to also replicate, probably even not want, but end up anyway, because that's the only model they know how, that to the next generation. So that's the most important thing I want to touch.
I think that's lovely, because it is children listen to what we do more than what we say, and modeling is the best picture for children. The other thing as we're talking, I was thinking about now is, I think the issue of not forgiving our fathers, and because partly when you hate someone, it's impossible to hate them and not change you, or not resolve those issues with your dad, and be different, because part of when you have your own, when you don't deal with your own issues, that's why you repeat the cycle. Exactly. Because you carry the same energy, the same negativity, and sometimes there's such a release in fact sometimes accepting your father for who he is, for who he is, and not who you want him to be. The ideal version. Look, you look next door, you'll see John's father drives a big Mercedes, has a lovely house, etc., etc. And there are things that you'll always yearn to see from the father next door that you'd want your father to have. But in my final 2 chapters, I think it is, I talk mostly actually about that thing of forgiveness and letting go of unfortunately the mistakes of the previous generation, to fix not only the relationships that are broken between that link, the previous generation, the current generation, but also to model and to actually clear the way for a better relationship model for this generation going into the next. And there's a lot of things that happened. Of course, we can think about people that divorced, we can think about people that had pregnancies that they didn't want to own up to, we can think about abusive fathers, we can think about fathers that were never really involved. There's so many types of things that went wrong in the fatherhood model that people would need to actually sit back, take time to think about, process, and decide themselves to say, you know what, this is what must have happened. I don't know what the context was, I don't understand. Perhaps it was my mom who didn't want my dad to come through. Perhaps you would never really know in totality what the issues were. But you have to decide now, what is it that you're going to do now that the situation is this? Now that you're not talking to your father, you know your father stays in the town next door, you know that he stays in the location, but you've never really actually sat down with him, you've never had a conversation with him. Is it something that you want to do personally, take up upon yourself?
go and speak to the man, try and make a relationship of some sort. And for me, this is what I'm trying to propagate, to say things have happened. We don't know what, and I don't want to trivialize the issues either and say perhaps you just forget about it and move on. We can't do that. But I would want to encourage that people deal with those issues, people deal with that forgiveness, people deal with whatever it is that took place in the previous generation, and say, I might not understand, I might not know all the details, but I'm interested more in making sure that this relationship of me and my father works so much so that this is actually going to model something good for me and my son.
I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. We've been discussing. So
it's been an hour
now. And so, are you writing fathering daughters?
It's always the question I get. And no, not yet. I'm actually experientially fathering daughters. It's an odd thing for me to have written a book about fathering sons, because I think I said at my launch as well, I don't have a son, firstly, and I never really had a father at home, so what gives me the experience or the pedigree for me to write this book? I don't. But look, let's see how things pan out, and if indeed there is an interest in the thing, let me leave that to the Holy Spirit.
I think part of what, when I was reading this, I thought it was also a journey for yourself. I mean, that's what I picked up. I picked up, there's this quote in psychology. It says that the wounded healer heals best. And so as I was going through it, one of the things I picked up is just your own story and why that would be important for this book. And so sometimes I think we go through experiences so that we can empower other people. So I think I can sense that you do care about the subject, but there were questions you were also trying to find out for yourself. I picked that up in the questionnaire as well. That it sounds as if you were also on a journey to resolve, question, make sense, just share with ideas.
No, totally. It's actually one of the things that my wife asked me to do, because I sent out these emails and things were coming through, and she asked me, have you taken part in the questionnaire yourself? I thought, what an odd thing to do, because hey, I sat down and wrote the questions. But of course, that's
where they came from.
Say most of those questions would have come from a place of my relationship with my dad, and how perhaps what if I wanted to be ideal, what were the problems with it, what informed that kind of space that we were in, and how does it actually refer and reflect with other men out there, and we could be more right.
Ronald, Muringai, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for making the time. Hopefully we'll have other conversations. There are many other things I'd like to talk to you about, but we'll leave that for later. But thank you for the time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Voila!